I'd ever seen.
Sounds like it's also acting on those vision centers in the brain or something too, huh?
It quite does, yes. There are parts of the brain that seem responsible for visual phenomena, and obviously DMT is affecting those fairly profoundly. And also kind of accompanying the display of visual imagery are really powerful emotions. It was pretty, as the effect of the drug began, people were kind of anxious just because of the strength and the rapidity of the onset. But once people kind of got themselves settled into the effects, there were quite powerful feelings of euphoria, of ecstasy, of bliss, which kind of accompanied the visual imagery.
Did people ever have bad trips? Were there ever negative emotions and negative visuals?
Yes, for sure. I'd say probably close to half of the people found themselves in some tight corners at some point in their experience. But I only recruited experienced hallucinogen users because I figured it was going to be a stressful experience to be getting intravenous DMT. And I wanted experienced volunteers to be able to kind of...
well, you knew their physiology could handle such an experience because they had been through it before, right?
I did pretty much, even though just a handful of people were experienced with smoking DMT. It wasn't that popular a street drug at the time, and as a matter of fact, it still is not that popular. But only a small number of the people that were in the study were experienced users of DMT. A remainder had taken mushrooms and LSD over the years. But even with those people being as experienced as they were, they still did find themselves in some tight places with DMT. It's pretty intense, and for even those people with experience smoking it, the intravenous way of taking it was significantly more profound than their smoked responses in the past.
Were you able to at least get a sense of the kind of factors involved when people had a good trip as opposed to a bad trip? Was it their mood, some particular day, something that happened? Did you find any correlation?
Well, I think the most common cause of a bad trip was people not being able to let go.
Oh.
Once
so you're resisting the experience as it's happening?
They tried to slow it down. They tried to resist it. They tried to stop it even. But once the effects of the drug began, it's pretty relentless. And the people that had the worst experiences were those people that just couldn't relax into it. Mm-hmm. I would kind of warn people to maybe think. Well, I would prepare people to the possibility of thinking that the injection of the drug had killed them, because for a number of people, the first perception that they would have was being out of body in some very, very strange realm.
They were having a near-death experience.
And they thought to themselves, oh, maybe I'm dead, and this is what it is like to die. So I would kind of warn people of the possibility of them flashing on that as they kind of came to in that state. And I would tell them that there were two ways of going. Either to panic and say, what the hell is this, and get me out of here as fast as I can. Or else the other response is, well, I've died and this is very interesting, so let's kind of see what happens next. Still, though, even with that kind of preparation, some people would panic when they found themselves in that state, not being quite certain about how they got there and how long they had been there and how long it was going to last for, those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. But, if people could relax, if they could be as relaxed as possible as the drug was going in, just take a deep breath and then an out breath, and then things were underway. In those cases, it was easiest for them to experience the more positive aspects of bliss in the ecstasy.
And I'm sure that's why in various indigenous cultures you had quite a protocol and you had guides and you had teachers with you, and it made it for a safer space than just taking a drug which you don't know the purity of it on the street. Yeah. Two very different experiences.
They're completely different experiences. And you know, our studies were all taking place in a hospital with intravenous lines in place. I was drawing samples of blood while people were tripping. There was a blood pressure cuff going off every few minutes. But, I mean, all of those things were kind of horrific, but still, if somebody was really able to let go, which the majority of our volunteers were, all of those extraneous external factors really kind of, you know, weren't that important.
So when people came out of their experience, then you recorded what it was and you were testing them as they were undergoing it and before and during and after. What kind of parameters were you looking for? What did you find?
Well, I was interested in the psychological effects primarily, but in terms of objective kinds of biological data, it's easier to write grants and publish papers if you have real objective, hard biological data.
What did the blood pressure do during these?
Well, it really went up. In fact, some folks had kind of close calls with their blood pressure as far as really an increase in their values. One guy had a blood pressure response of over 200. His top number went over 200, bottom number went over to about 150.
You don't want to lose anybody, so
no.
Do you have nurses standing by to administer counteractive
for sure.
effects and all that?
Well, yeah, and we really screened people carefully before they got into the study to make certain their blood pressure was normal. But still, we had a couple of close calls with blood pressure. One guy's blood pressure actually became extremely low as a result of his DMT experience. And,
why would that be, do you suppose? And did he have an unusual trip? Was it a factor?
I think as a response to his trip, he found himself in outer space being steered toward a space station, and he ended up in the space station with all these androids around him. Yeah. And he was just startled. He was so shocked at the effect. His blood pressure just bottomed out, and he opened up his eyes, which was a mistake, and he looked around the room at me and the nurse and the hospital room, and his blood pressure went even lower.
When he opened his eyes, what did he see? Did he see you, or did he see an overlay of wherever he was?
Well, it was an overlay of what was happening in his trip and an overlay of all the visual kinds of things that occur when people are on drugs, the distortion and the amplification, those kinds of things. And actually, a few volunteers early on in the studies opened up their eyes too early. And so as a result of their sort of unpleasant experiences, we started making certain that that people were kind of wearing blinders on their eyes. And if they opened up their eyes just in kind of a reflex manner to orient themselves, they would still be kind of black space, and they just close their eyes again and relax into it some more. But it would be a bit disorienting for people to
so. Yeah. What else did you test in terms of physiology?
Well, I was interested in all kinds of levels of hormones in the blood, including growth hormone and endorphins.
What'd you find?
Well, the concentrations of the endorphins went up sky high. And
that
as a matter of
makes
fact,
sense, doesn't it?
Well, it does. Either as a stress response, which endorphins can be, but also I think as a corollary of the ecstatic states that people were in as well.
If people weren't having a good experience, did those endorphins not kick in? Was that one of the factors, or
no? It really didn't correlate with the quality of the experience. It was more of a correlation with the intensity of the experience.
What about stress hormones, cortisol and all of that? What happened there?
Well, all the stress hormones went up. Levels of cortisol went up. Levels of growth hormone went up. Levels of prolactin went up.
What is prolactin?
Well, it's an interesting hormone. It comes from the pituitary gland.